Once the 5 students heard their names being called, each of them began to make their way towards the sergeant, who was waiting for them in front of the crowd. Apart from Quinn and Vorden, there was another boy in their group. Peter looked to be the most nervous among anyone there. He would constantly look around him, and he couldn't stop fidgeting either. His body frame was quite small, but it suited him, for he wasn't that tall either. Looking at him reminded Quinn of himself. A small frame with glasses and scruffy brown hair, he was not much for a physical attraction. The other 2 members were both girls. Lila had short brown hair and a tall figure, and she was carrying a bow on her back, which surprised Quinn since not many people carried a weapon these days, apart from a specific group of people called Pure. They were a group of people who claimed that abilities were a blight upon humanity, and instead opted to use weapons. However, they were very rare, and Quinn had never met anyone who belonged in the faction in his life. He had merely heard stories about them. Erin, on the other hand, was the type of girl whose beauty turned necks. Her proportions were perfect, not too big and not too small, and she had long, silky hair with a magnificent golden hue. The only problem was her facial expressions. Even while walking through the gathering of people, not once did her expression change. It stayed stiff and neutral and made her appear cold. The awe on the faces of the other kids was lost on hers. As Quinn was walking to the front, he noticed that he couldn't recognize any of the students there, and it seemed like the others were not familiar with anybody either. Quinn could only assume that this was done on purpose. Their group soon stopped just behind another group that was being transported to the testing area. Vorden walked around and greeted each one of the people in his group with a handshake and a confident smile. Vorden was very polite, so most of them accepted his greetings, all of them except for Erin. She merely stared at Vorden's hand when he offered it to her, then turned her gaze away after a second. "Come on, you don't have to be like that," Vorden said as he placed his hand on her shoulder. A terrible mistake. Erin moved faster than anyone could react. She grabbed Vorden's wrist and twisted his hand. Specks of ice started to crawl up his hand and began to freeze his limb. They were making a scene, and everyone gleefully watched. "Wow, she has ice abilities?" one of the boys said. "Isn't that very rare? I would let her freeze me any day." Several students expressed their amazement in unison. "Stop it, you two," Griff barked at their little fight. "If you have that much energy to pick a fight, then save it for the test." Erin immediately dropped Vorden's hand, leaving him gasping in pain. Slowly, his hand started defrosting. He scrambled back to the line and stood behind Quinn, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Can you believe her?" Vorden complained. "I nearly lost my hand." "You can't just go around touching people without their permission," Quinn replied. "Yeah, I know. She's lucky I didn't wipe the floor with her just 'cause she's a pretty girl." His words were creating enemies for him, many of them admirers of Erin, who felt disgracing Vorden might earn them points with the beautiful girl. Looking at the people around them, Quinn could tell what the others were thinking. It was on their faces. Instinctively, Quinn moved away from Vorden, hoping that others wouldn't mistake the 2 of them as friends. At last, Quinn and the others were called forward and were told to stand inside of a square drawn with white lines on the ground. The space inside of it was just big enough to fit the 5 of them in. One would notice that outside of the square, there was a hooded man who was standing nearby. "Send them away," Griff ordered. As soon as Griff gave the command, the hooded man planted both of his hands on the ground, and the square started to light up, shining in a bright purple color. "An ability to transport others, huh?" Vorden said, leaning forward to speak into Quinn's ears, much to the latter's discomfort. "What a rare ability!" The plain fields faded from their sight, and they were thrown into a whirlwind of colors. The very next second, they found themselves in another outdoor area, this time an empty wasteland. There was no sign of life nor greeneries. 2 people stood before the group, a woman dressed in black, and next to her, another man whose face was hidden beneath his hood. Quinn could not make out the badge on the arm of either of their uniforms, making it impossible to tell what rank they possessed. The woman held a tablet in one of her clutches, busy thumbing through it. She ignored the group that had appeared before her and continued until she was done. Once she had finished, she shifted her gaze to the students and began to speak. "Hello, I am Jane, and I will be the one in charge of your test today. Once the test has been completed, I will be updating your information, and your score will then be reflected on your wristwatches." Quinn noted that her face appeared to display the same emotional range as Aaron's. "Now, who should we call first?" "Oh, it looks like we have a couple of previously leveled ones," Jane noted as her eyes ran across her tablet screen. The tablet seemed such a delicate thing to hold in this place where the beautiful city was out of sight. The information the woman made mention of had been passed down from their previous schools. "Peter Chuck, step forward." The nervous, small-physiqued Peter did as he had been told, looking even worse than before. Quinn thought that he appeared unsightly, yet he looked to be in perfect condition if you were to compare the two. At least Quinn could stand up, whereas Peter looked like he would fall over at any second. "What is your ability?" Jane asked. I don't have any ability," Peter answered quietly. Quinn and the others now understood why Peter had been so nervous. Having no ability wasn't rare. Because of the war, many children had ended up as orphans like Quinn. This usually meant that there was no chance for them to buy an ability book. "Here, take this," Jane said, as the hooded man who was standing beside her suddenly conjured a book in his hand and held it out quietly. Jane took the book and handed it to Peter. "For me? You're just giving this to me for free?" Peter asked with excitement in his voice. "Thank you." "Study the book in your own free time. When you have finally learned to use it, you can come back to redo the test. But for now, I'll have to temporarily award you a Level 1 power status." Even though Peter had received a Level 1 power status, he didn't care about it. At this moment, he only felt hope. His life could finally turn around due to the book that he had just received. "Quinn Talen, step forward," Jane ordered, looking at him. Quinn did as he was told. "What is your ability?" Quinn thought the whole thing was ridiculous. It was quite clear to him that Jane already had all the information on him from his previous school. They knew that he never had an ability before. The problem was Quinn was struggling with deciding what to do. Before coming to military school, Quinn had done a bit of research himself. He knew that the military gave all students who had no ability an ability book. Each ability book given was the same one. It was an Earth ability book. The reason they did this was so students who didn't have an ability before would suddenly feel indebted to the military. Not only that, but the military also had a hold on nearly all of the Earth-type ability books. Meaning, if you ever wanted to increase your strength, you would have to be loyal to the military, and in return, they would give you more power. Before Quinn had discovered his own ability, he actually thought this was the best option for him. Even if he didn't want to join the military after 2 years, the Earth ability was handy to have. It was easy for employment because the Earth ability was useful in construction. This was where the problem came in. Quinn already having an ability meant he was unable to learn a new one. The ability book was practically useless. Not only that, but Quinn was pretty sure they would keep tabs on every student they had given the ability book to, meaning the teachers would expect him to use Earth powers the next time they saw him. Quinn took a deep breath and said, "I don't have an ability." Just like before, the hooded man standing by her side handed her a book and then handed it to Quinn. Quinn took the book off Jane at first, but then suddenly a notification screen appeared. Unable to learn this ability. Would you like to convert the book into 10 XP? Quinn had somewhat expected the system to display the first message, but the second one truly had surprised him. Quinn was really tempted to take the book and use it as a form of XP, but he knew there would be questions asked later on. "I'm sorry, but I don't want it," Quinn said as he handed the book back to Jane. The students watching and the instructor stood there were both shocked. Jane hadn't experienced anything like this before. In her 5 years working as an instructor, it was the first time someone with no ability had rejected the book. "Please give me one moment." Jane then stood away from the group of students far enough so they wouldn't be able to hear anything. Yes, he says he doesn't want the ability book. What shall I do?" Jane said, speaking on her earpiece. "Let him take the test," the mysterious man on the phone said. As the man hung up, he couldn't help but think that Quinn was an interesting student. He started to look at Quinn's file, and what he had said seemed to be true. The student had no ability and didn't seem to have any relations with the group Pure. "Let's see how long you can survive in this cruel world, Quinn," the man said. Back at the testing field, Jane had finished the call with her superior and started to head back over to the group. "Sorry for waiting," Jane said. "Since you won't be taking the ability book, we will still require you to take the test, please." Quinn thought the whole thing was a joke. If Quinn truly had no ability, then they already knew what the test results were going to be. Was there really a need for him to take the test? It felt like the only reason they wanted Quinn to continue was to make himself feel humiliated and small. Eventually, then he would choose to go to the military and beg for the ability book they were handing out. "Please follow me." Jane then took Quinn a little further out onto the field, where Quinn noticed that there were huge craters in the ground, burn marks, and all sorts of things. This was all done from the previous testing contestants. "Please proceed to destroy the targets in front of you as quick as you can," Jane said. "The test will begin immediately." As soon as Jane finished talking, 3 targets popped up randomly around the wasteland. They were metal round targets with a red dot in the center. The problem was when Quinn tried to look for the targets, everything seemed like a blur in the distance. "Is this because I'm out in the sunlight?" Quinn thought. Quinn had no choice but to slowly run up to each of the targets and hit them with his fist, one by one. His time was incredibly slow, of course. There were then 2 further tests that Quinn needed to complete. The next test was a strength test, where Quinn was asked to punch into a huge drum-like machine. Quinn gave it his best shot and hit the drum as hard as he could. The drum vibrated and made a small sound, eventually displaying a digital number in the center. 5, strength, Jane said as she noted it down on her tablet. When the final test had arrived, they had brought out another machine. This machine was a big circular object with many holes on its front. Once the test started, the machine fired holographic spikes at the contestants. All Quinn needed to do was avoid being hit by the spikes. The machine went up in levels and eventually got faster and shot out more spikes. In the end, Quinn managed to get hit and the test was stopped. "Agility, 5, Jane said once again as she noted it down on her tablet. Quinn had heard the words from Jane's mouth, and it started to make him think if there was some sort of link to the score she had given him. The last test was a test of strength, and Quinn had scored a 5, similar to his system which had stated he had 5 strength. Then once again, this test focused on agility and scored a 5, which was the same as his system. This meant if Quinn was to take the test at night, all of his scores would have most likely doubled. This also meant as long as he leveled up, he could always increase his score. It was as if his ability was the ability to evolve, but had some drawbacks with it as well. "As expected," Jane said. "Unfortunately, your current power level is a level 1. Quinn clenched his fist and went back to stand with the others. He knew that the days ahead of him as a level 1 user would be tough, but that wouldn't be for much longer. The test continued with Lila taking the test next. She was the only one there who had a weapon on her back. The weapon she used was a bow, but it didn't look like a regular bow that people used to use a long time ago. This bow was carved using parts of a beast. It was black in color and looked almost as if the entire bow was made of gems. Even the string was made of a special material. The reason the bow looked so different was because it was what was known as a beast weapon, a bow made from the body parts of a beast. When the human race was attacked by the Dalki, our technology advanced fast by replicating their technology. With this, the humans learned the ability to travel to other planets using portals. These planets would often contain different levels of beasts. The stronger the beast was, the better weapon you could make out of it. It was the first time Quinn had ever witnessed a beast weapon before, as no one at his previous school had one. It was strange to see someone of such a young age, who was most likely never been to another planet, to have a beast weapon. Lila stood in the center of the field and waited for the test to start. Unlike when it was Quinn's turn, they waited until she was ready before starting. Quinn could already start to see a difference in treatment. When the test started, 5 random targets all appeared in different areas of the wasteland. Lila immediately took out 5 arrows and placed them in her bow, shooting them all off at once in the same direction. The arrows shot out fast and strong, but then suddenly the 5 arrows split off into their own direction, each of them heading to a different target. "What a good combo," Vorden said. "She was the ability of telekinesis, but it's quite weak, so instead she uses her ability combined with the bow to control the arrows." In an instant, all 5 of the targets were hit at the same time, and she had completed the first test. Quinn, for the first time, saw how useful beast weapons were. Even if you had a weak ability, you could make it strong. Quinn wasn't completely sure what his ability was yet, but even if it just increased his stats as he leveled up, then he thought about how handy something like a beast sword or something similar would be. On the strength test, Lila didn't do so well. She used her powers to try to move her fist even faster when punching the drum, but in the end her score was only an 8. The last test, Quinn also saw her do quite bad. When the test first started, Lila tried to use her ability on the spikes coming at her. Unknown to her because they were holograms and not the real thing, it had no effect. Meaning all Lila could do was rely on her actual body to avoid the spikes. In the end, Lila ended getting the same score as Quinn. "It looks like you have the ability level of a level 2 user," Jane said, and immediately the number 2 appeared on Lila's wrist. Quinn could tell Lila wasn't happy. She stropped back as she walked over to the group. Quinn thought the test wasn't really fair. Her ability level might be that of a level 2, but when used with a bow, Quinn felt like she could have easily beaten some level 3 or 4 users. Quinn was starting to take note that the Academy really did only measure the power level of your ability and not your fighting ability. The next person to take the test was Erin. She walked forward confidently without even looking at anyone else. She stood in the center of the testing field waiting for the test to start. Then 5 random targets appeared across the wasteland. Immediately, she formed an ice spear and chucked it at the target, hitting it dead on. She did this one after the other at an incredible speed, nearly clearing them all just as fast as Lila did. The next test, Erin, was even more impressive. She started to gather ice in both her palms, and then after a minute or so of gathering her power, a huge ice column was shot from her hands and hit the center of the drum dead on. The drum rang out louder than it had before, and the number kept going up until it had eventually reached 50. "No wonder she's so confident," Vorden said. Quinn suddenly thought it was a good thing the 2 of them didn't fight, otherwise Vorden would have been a dead man. Finally, when the last test had arrived, the instructor told her she wasn't allowed to use her ability and should just dodge. Erin had no reaction and started the test immediately. She managed to do well, moving swiftly, avoiding each spike, but eventually the machine had gotten too fast and she ended up getting hit. "Impressive," Jane said. "Best result so far, power level 5. Erin continued to walk back to her group as if she knew what she was going to get all along. Either that or she didn't really care about the whole thing. Finally, the last person to take the test in the group was Vorden. "Time to show you what I got. Wish me luck." Quinn had no clue who Vorden was talking to, but Quinn quickly realized it was him after Vorden gave a wink in his direction as he walked off to the center of the field. Could that idiot actually be strong? Quinn thought. Most of the time, people who strong were either arrogant about their powers or kept it quiet, but Vorden was a strange person. He wasn't exactly arrogant, but more flashy. When it finally came to his turn and the test had started, everyone's mouth was left wide open at what they were seeing. On every single one of the tests, Vorden had done the exact same thing as Aaron. He had used the same ability, the ability of ice, and had performed just as well. "See, I told you I was strong," Vorden said as he showed the number 5 to his new best friend, Quinn. Just what was Vorden's ability, Quinn thought. After seeing Vorden perform well on the test, Quinn couldn't help but think about what Vorden's ability was. When Vorden went to shake his hand that time, it said that Vorden had tried to use his ability on Quinn. Yet for some reason, his ability didn't work. If Vorden's ability was ice, surely his hand would have just frozen, unless Quinn had an ability to block all abilities, but that was highly unlikely. Not only that, but straight after, even Vorden had a strange reaction and had asked Quinn what his ability was, as if he knew his ability didn't work. Then another thought came into Quinn's mind. Why was Vorden so adamant on shaking everyone he had just met? If Quinn remembered correctly, Aaron refused to shake Vorden's hand, but in the end, Vorden still went to touch Aaron on the shoulder. At the time, it seemed like a weird thing to do, but now Quinn realized it wasn't, and everything was starting to make sense. Touching was the condition. The last person Quinn touched was Aaron. It couldn't be a coincidence that both of them had the same powers, which meant most likely that Vorden's ability was the ability to copy other people's ability. It didn't work on Quinn because his ability wasn't straightforward. Quinn couldn't help his curiosity and had to ask, "Hey, Vorden, is your ability—" Quinn whispered, "Are you able to copy other people's abilities?" Vorden looked at Quinn and smiled. "I'm surprised you figured it out so fast. How did you know?" Quinn thought Vorden was quite amazing to be able to guess something like that just from a handshake. After all, it was much more likely that Vorden had obtained the ice ability from an ability book. The power for copying wasn't available as an ability book, which meant one thing. "Are you an original?" Quinn asked. Vorden didn't say anything, but simply gave a wink back at Quinn, which pretty much confirmed Quinn's thoughts. Vorden was an original, a person from a family who decided not to share their abilities with the outside world, someone who was usually able to surpass the power level of 8. Once the test had been completed, the hooded man teleported the students to the front of the academy where they would be staying. The academy was huge and the tallest building in the entire city. It was as if someone had put together 3 hotels. There was a total of 10 different teachers that were currently standing in front of the academy. In front of them were groups of students who had all finished taking the test. The students were told to wait with the teachers until all the students had finished conducting their tests. Once in a while, a group of 5 students would be teleported in front of one of the teachers. Finally, where Quinn was standing, there now was a total of 20 students. "Okay, you all need to follow me as I take you around the school," the teacher up front said. The teacher was a middle-aged man with blonde curly hair and wore glasses. His name was Dell. While Dell walked around describing the various places of the academy, he couldn't help but smile. It looked like nothing was able to upset him. "You guys should start to get to know each other as much as you can," Dell said. "After all, the people you are with now will be your classmates." Suddenly, everyone started to get chattier with each other as they were being shown around the school, but there was something Quinn had noticed. The mid-levels were trying their best to get friendly with the higher levels, while the low levels were being completely ignored. And Quinn and Peter were the only 2 level 1s in the class. Without realizing it, they had been pushed to the back of the class, and Peter was plodding along with his head held down. It seemed to have affected Peter a lot more than Quinn, but Quinn had already suspected this would happen. Suddenly, though, a familiar voice was heard calling out Quinn's name. "There you are," Vorden said. "Man, people just started jumping all over me. Then all of a sudden, I looked to my right and you're gone. Come on, let's look around together, friend." Quinn truly thought Vorden was a strange person, but that wasn't a bad thing. Vorden then noticed Peter was on his own as well. Come on, you come over too. Stop being a downer." Peter looked up and pointed a finger at himself. "Who else do you think I'm talking to?" Vorden said. The three of them continued to hang at the back of the class while the teacher continued to tour around the school. They were shown a battle arena where they had similar testing equipment to the field on the wasteland, as well as several square fighting platforms. They were also shown their homeroom classes, battle classes, sports rooms, and all sorts. Dell would explain a little bit about each area of the school they visited, but Quinn was uninterested in most of it until they had finally reached the library. The library here is split into 3 floors, as you can see. First-year students are only able to access the first floor, second-year students can also go on the second floor, and finally, the last floor is only for military personnel. Quinn was interested in the library because it contained books that weren't available to the public. Here, Quinn just might find some information about his ability. He just hoped it would be on the first floor. Finally, the tour was coming to an end as Dell stopped just outside the school's dorms. "And this is where you will be staying during your stay here. Once you have dropped off your things, feel free to explore around the academy. There will be no lessons today, so you will get to have the rest of the afternoon to explore." Each student was then handed a number on a piece of paper one by one, which displayed which room they would be staying in. Quinn then noticed from the corner of his eye Vorden coming towards him. "Hey Quinn, what room number you got?" Vorden asked. 23. "No way, you're kidding, right? I got the same number. Maybe it's fate bringing us together," Vorden said excitedly. "Maybe," Quinn replied. Meanwhile, somewhere down the hallway, 2 other students were having a conversation. "Whoa, what happened to you?" a student said, looking at his friend. "I don't know, man. Some guy just came and hit me out of nowhere and swapped room numbers." "Man, should we try to get it back?" the student asked. "Nah, if I saw his wrist correctly, it said he was a level 5. It's best if we just leave it."